On today's live daily news, we get you ready for our big fall festival for children with special needs at Jim Bass Ford, and a Democrat, that's right, is in the office with a one-on-one extensive interview with Joe Hyde. All this and more. I'm Matt Trammell, and this is Live. All right, like I said, a Democrat is here in office. We're going to go to him and Joe Hyde. It's about a 45, 50-minute interview, so it's going to be really good, and we're going to take that for our whole daily news show as we get ready for our fall festival. Before we get to that interview, of course, here's a quick message from the Bass Bunch.
Do you have a child with special needs? Well, we have a special day of fun just for you. It's the Fall Festival for Children with Special Needs, sponsored by Jim Bass Ford and San Angelo Live. Join us at Jim Bass Ford Thursday, October 26th from 4:30 to 6:30 p.m. for games, prizes, refreshments, and candy. Free for children with special needs and their families. The 2023 Fall Festival at Jim Bass Ford at the corner of Houston Hart and Arden Road. Don't miss it.
Well, welcome back to the show. I'm Joe Hyde. I'm joined today with a guest from out of town who is trying to shake up the Texas political landscape. Welcome with here on the show with Thierry Tchenko, running for U.S. Senate as a Democrat.
That's right.
And you plan to, you have a crowded field right now, but if you won the primary,
That's right.
You'd go up against Ted Cruz.
That's right.
And Ted Cruz has been the senator from Texas, a U.S. senator from Texas since 2012. Because I remember that David Dewhurst versus Ted Cruz. That was a wild
primary.
Wild primary back then. But anyway, you're from Houston.
Yeah.
I'm from Houston too. I grew up in Houston, so we share that.
Yeah.
And we kind of have this little macroeconomic model of Houston where
Yep.
we can talk about some of these issues.
For sure.
But before we get started, tell me about yourself.
Yeah, and first, thank you for having me, Joe. I
Yeah.
appreciate it. It's good to be here in San Angelo. Name is Thierry Tchenko. Born and raised in Houston, as you said. I was born
Right.
on the southwest side of town, and son of immigrants.
And for people to understand what the southwest side of town is, that's toward the beach.
Yeah. So born on the southwest side of town. My parents are from Cameroon.
Okay.
So first generation, and they came to the United States really because they wanted a chance at the American dream.
Mm-hmm.
There wasn't a lot of opportunity in Cameroon, so they came here in the early 90s. My dad was working at a gas station. Mom was working in the service industry, and they were just grinding, working every day.
And this is in Southwest Houston?
This is in Southwest Houston.
Okay.
So this is.
And how old were you when you came?
I was born and raised in Houston.
You were born there,
Mhm.
okay.
So born and raised in Houston.
So your life was you were probably living in apartments on
Yep.
the southwest side?
Yep, we're living in
down
apartments.
there by the Gulf Gate Mall?
Yeah. Well, it was Sharpstown Mall.
Sharpstown Mall,
That's right.
okay.
So, yeah, living in Houston and seeing my parents and seeing how hard they were working.
Mm-hmm.
And at that age, I was just watching them and observing them, and it really gave me a passion to want to serve people like them. So
Mm-hmm.
I remember I was 5 years old during the George Bush, Al Gore election
Mm-hmm.
results and watching the TV at my uncle's house in Sharpstown and thinking, I want to be involved in this democratic process. There's something appealing about it.
Right.
I wouldn't.
And coming with a background from Cameroon,
That's right.
of all places, where you probably don't have elections.
That's right.
Right?
That's right. So, yes, just a different political climate and landscape.
Right.
So the opportunity being in the United States, being able to have a democracy, those are all things that
Mm-hmm.
as I got older, I started to appreciate more and more.
Now, Houston has been a magnet for immigrants for years and years. But before we get into the immigration issue, because I want to talk to you about that,
Yeah,
because
let's
you
talk
probably have a pretty unique perspective on it. Where did you go to school? Where did you go to college? Stuff like that. What have you been doing? Because you didn't just all of a sudden say I turned 18, I'm gonna run for Senate.
Yeah. So actually, I got my start in civic engagement when I was 13.
Mm-hmm.
So I was a precinct captain for Barack Obama's campaign during the Texas primary.
08?
In 2007. That's right, the 08
2007,
campaign.
08,
But,
okay.
Yep. So was doing that. So late 2007, early 2008, knocking on doors,
Mm-hmm.
calling voters, and was actually able to go to Virginia and help out the campaign during the general election
Mm-hmm.
before I started the 8th grade. So I was learning politics, understanding what it's like to
Right.
be in community. Ended up coming back to Houston, finished up school in Southwest Houston before going to Abilene, and I went to McMurray University,
Okay.
which gave me my love for rural Texas because
It's also West Texas. It's a little bit different from Houston. It's
Yes,
not.
for sure.
It's not as humid.
not as humid,
It's probably just as hot.
just as hot, not as humid.
Yeah.
Right. So I wasn't sweating as much when I was
Right.
walking out the door, but played college basketball at McMurray.
Okay.
But my time at McMurray really allowed for me to get a good understanding of rural Texas, of West Texas. And yes, are there some differences between Houston and Abilene? Of course, we would all admit that.
Right.
But at the end of the day, people really want the same thing.
So, Mr. Tchenko, why did you decide to be a Democrat?
Yeah.
I mean, you have the experience of the Republican West
Yeah.
and the Democrat southeast side of Houston.
Yeah.
What gravitated you toward the Democrat Party other than Barack Obama? I mean, he was definitely a very charismatic leader
sure.
and stuff like that. But what was it?
Because Democrats have a history of fighting for the working people.
Okay.
Right. And that's something that throughout the history of our country, right, whether it's the civil rights movement, whether you look at labor Democrats have been fighting for the little guy. And that's really who my family
So
is.
I'm going to ask you a political question now.
Talk to me.
Okay. So one of the main reasons Trump won in 2016 was because Hillary wasn't fighting for the little guy. I mean, would you agree with me?
I think that's a huge reason that there was a frustration.
And Trump had a message to the working guy,
Yeah.
saying, "Hey, I know you're being screwed,
Yeah.
and I'm here to stop it." And he would drive through these towns up in the northeast where the factories closed down, and there's nothing but despair left in these towns where they export all the jobs to China. And then that's why his statements about China resonated.
Yeah.
You know, so it's like there's no one fighting for you. And his signature deal is, they're coming after me because when they take me out, they're going to come after you, right? He's the only thing standing in the way. So how if the Democrats are for the working man or for the little guy, what the heck happened to the party?
Yeah. I think the system is broken. The system is broken, and that's not just...
The Democrats broke their system.
Well, I mean, when you look at Texas right now, right, and we've had Republican leadership in the state for almost 30 years now. We have 40% of people in our state that make under $15 an hour.
Okay.
We have 20% of people in our state that don't have health insurance, which is the highest
Well, let's
rate in
stop
the
right
country.
there. It's not that they don't have health care.
Yeah.
They don't have. They chose not to do the Medicaid reimbursement from the feds because I've talked to Abbott, in interviews, and he says, I don't know how long that's going to last. And then he could all of a sudden they could cut it off, and we're stuck with this gigantic entitlement we have to pay for, which would mean for all the voting for the little guy out there, that they're going to have a state income tax to pay for it.
It's more than just Medicaid expansion. I think on the state level we should have passed
But
that.
that's the tripe. The Democrats say that you don't want people to have health care. That's why you don't accept this free money, this $100 billion a year, $120 billion a year, whatever the number is, right? I'm sure it changes every year, and it's probably going on a downward trajectory. But you don't take it because you don't care about people. But that's not the truth. What the Republican argument is that we don't have health insurance. We're not going to give you Medicaid if you're a $60,000 annual employed plumber. We're not going to give you Medicaid. So you can either buy it yourself, get it through your employer, or if you need help, we'll help you at the emergency room. And I realize that that's expensive, but that's the choice we were given. Otherwise, we have this liability of this Medicaid expansion. You expand Medicaid to people making $50,000, $60,000 a year.
So there's a Medicaid piece that's important, and I think that we should have done it, especially at the onset whenever
Right.
there was
I think
an
we shouldn't have,
opportunity.
because it was too wide open of a liability on the state.
But the federal government was taking on 100% of the cost at first, and
They
then
were,
now
of course they were.
90% to 10%.
But
So
the federal government's $33 trillion in debt.
Yeah.
So when does that run out?
Yeah.
And when it runs out, you're going to have all these people who for 5, 10, for decades, for a decade or so, have been getting free Medicaid, and all of a sudden you're going to have to pay for it. I mean, once you start an entitlement, we know this, and this is a problem with the vouchers, which we're probably going to agree on vouchers. That's an entitlement. That is a middle to upper middle class entitlement. Once you start an entitlement, you ain't going to end it.
But my argument is bigger than Medicaid.
Okay.
Right? Medicaid is a piece of it.
Right.
But I believe that every Texan should have access to affordable and accessible health insurance.
Okay.
That we shouldn't have a state where we have 20% of our state, 1 in every 5 people, that don't have health insurance. So if you have a stomach pain, you're worried about going to the doctor's office because you may have to deal with a $60,000 or $70,000 medical bill. I don't think that that's right. I think that everybody should have health insurance so that if you're dealing with aches and pains.
But it's expensive. It's really expensive.
That's right.
And we don't, my back is only so strong. I can't carry, I'm carrying my load for my insurance. I carry my load for my employees' health insurance, which, by the way, is not that good.
Yeah.
It's $6,000 deductible, and they're paying, $500 to $1,000 a month for it. And I'm thinking, and please, insurance salespeople, don't call me. I'm giving general numbers. But you know what I mean.
Yeah, of course.
When you're paying for it you understand what the benefits and the costs are.
Absolutely.
And so you're looking at, and my thought is, I mean, like this MediShare, this is a Christian-based health insurance kind of thing. Yeah. If we can put, taxis out of service with Uber and the innovation we have in our entrepreneurial economy, why can't we turn it loose on healthcare? Yeah. Why can't we get some new ideas out there that make it more productive? Yeah. Because right now I feel like the government says you can charge this much and you don't have to. You can give a $6,000 deductible. Yeah. Boom, that's Obamacare Silver.
Yep.
Right.
Yep. Which we talked about, and a lot of folks that qualify for Obamacare Silver or the Silver Plan in the Affordable Care Act, it's too expensive. Right. So we have to find
I have employees that will not take. They'll say, "No, I'll just take my risk."
Yeah.
And they'll probably end up being sorry they did. But I mean, it's $6,000 for a kid out of Angelo State University. That's like
that's a lot of money.
That's a big deductible, and they're thinking, well, that's for catastrophic stuff. I'm 10 feet tall and bulletproof. Yeah. Why do I need health insurance? Why do I need to spend $200, $300? I mean, out of my pocket. The other thing I think that's messed up with our healthcare system is it makes you cover all these weird things. Why do we have to cover, childbirth for men? That kind of thing. And that's probably an extreme example, but there's a lot of mental health in there, and people today tend to be diagnosed with more mental health problems because of technology and knowledge that we have of the mental health thing. But also, I think there's a lot of, fluff in there.
Well, we have a huge mental health problem in our state, and we rank 49th in mental health care. If you're living in Amarillo, you need to drive 3 hours to be able to get good mental health care. And I just don't think that's right. We have to be able to
What
make
about
sure.
this? There's 27 states in Texas where you can't deliver, or 27 counties in Texas where you can't deliver a baby.
Yeah.
Why is that? Because the commercialization of hospitals. Yeah. I mean, we used to have these regional hospitals that were commercial. Like here, we had Community. You talk to anyone here in San Angelo, you remember we had Community versus Shannon. Yeah. We don't have Community anymore. That was a for-profit hospital that couldn't make enough money for its shareholders, so they sold out and packed up and left. They left here, Abilene, and Brownwood. They said bye. Yeah. So we don't have any competition in healthcare, and then a lot of these smaller communities have lost.
That's right.
Whatever they had.
That's right. I was in Young County in Graham, Texas. This was a couple of months ago, and I was talking to a small business owner, and she was saying, "Look, I make around $30,000-$40,000 a year, but I have to pay $600 a month for health insurance." Yep. And
she must have been young.
But let me tell you this. $600 a month in health insurance. You're talking about $30,000 to $40,000. That's a gross. That's not net. Yeah. Let alone with rent costing $1,000.
Well, it's $7,200 a year. So it's about a little bit less than a third. Maybe it's at least 25% of her pay.
So we're not even giving people an opportunity of being able to take care of their responsibility.
We're not talking about the cost of housing.
Yep.
I mean, to buy a house in San Angelo that's worth a darn.
Yep.
I mean, you're looking at a mortgage of $3,000. Yeah.
Right? And when you look at the average median income in San Angelo, it's just above $30,000. So when you now calculate, you have families that are thinking about, okay, do I pay for electricity or do I pay for food? And if you're working 40 hours a week in this state, I don't believe that it's right that you have to be making those type of decisions, whether you're going to pay for your electricity and have light or pay for food. Well, I mean,
the other thing is, how do you get ahead? Yeah. I mean, for example, let's say you make 10 grand a month. Let's say you just take a middle class guy making 10 grand a month. Well, if $3,000 to $4,000 is his house, that's 30 to 40% debt. Right. That's incredible. It's incredible. And then the other thing you tack onto that is, who knows what the tax policy is going to be from the feds. We don't know. But that $10,000 a month, and 5 years ago, if you were making $10,000 a month, you could save a little, kind of move ahead. You can't do it now. Yeah. You can't do it.
And I'm saying all of these things that I'm talking about, that's with Republican leadership in the state for the last 20 years.
Well,
so we're on the same page. We have a lot of problems that this state is facing.
I think a lot of it's coming from the federal level, which has been Democrats.
Yeah.
I mean, seriously.
How so?
Well, you want to be in the Senate, right? Well, first of all, I have never felt better about my business than I did in 2017, 18, and 19. Okay. And the reason is the Trump tax cuts. Okay. Now, I realize it was probably McConnell that did it because Trump was just up there flailing while people saved him. Okay. But those tax cuts made everyone had their fangs out and they were out there making business. And the thing about making business, when people are out making business, people are making money, we don't have that right now. It's kind of a weird thing. Like today they came out and said the GDP went up 4.7% or something, or 4.9%. Where in the heck is that? I mean, I don't know. There is something weird with our national economy that is probably caused by too much government spending and way too much money getting thrown out there. The PPP and the ERC. Got people call me on the phone all the time saying, I can get you another $30,000 from the IRS. I'm like, where's this money coming from?
Yeah.
And it's still out there. And so I think that's just kind of floating us through this, where we should just go through the recession, get it over with. We're just going to, dribble on this. It's going to be like the first years of the George W. Bush administration when everything was kind of hard, right after the 9/11 attacks. Yeah. But that's too much spending.
Well, we've been talking to everyday Texans. We've been to almost 60 counties already on the campaign.
So what are they telling you?
And they're telling me the same thing, that things have been rough and they continue on being rough, and that they feel like the system is broken, that no one is actually thinking about them and going into elected office to try to pass policies that are going to help them out. So you mentioned
let's go back. Let's take one example. Yep. What would you do if you could propose legislation in the U.S. Senate to fix this healthcare problem, where you got people like my employees paying $700-800 a month for a $6,000 deductible policy that covers a lot of crap they don't really need to get covered anyway? I'm giving you a loaded question.
No, it's okay.
What would you do with it? What kind of policy would you propose?
We need a public healthcare system with a private option. Right. So if you have a private provider that you enjoy and you want to keep that, then you're able to do so. But then there's a public baseline that we have, so that if, let's say, you lay off an employee or you change plans, that none of your employees have to worry about not having health insurance. There's a way of being able to do that makes sure that there's competition, so costs are able to stay low, and then people are able to be comfortable and confident that they have health insurance if there's a problem that they have from a health standpoint.
We effectively have the private option here in San Angelo. We have one gigantic medical conglomerate called Shannon Health.
Yep.
And when Shannon Health got the monopoly, there's maybe 3 or 4 doctors who are still left practicing. If your favorite doctor is probably going to retire when you do this private option thing, it's going to be all single payer. Government's going to pay it, and it's going to be too dang expensive. And
it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to. With what I'm saying, it doesn't have to be. You have a public option with the private that's supposed to keep competition and keep costs low. It's true.
What government program has been cost controlled ever?
Well, this would be cost controlled and ensuring that you have a public baseline and that you also have a private option, so that you're able to keep.
But your private option is going to go away.
It won't. Doesn't have to. If you're providing good care.
It will go away, because they will not be able to survive. And you see it here with Shannon. I mean, I'm not harping too bad on Shannon, because the Shannon story is, let's take the Republican idea. Let's take instead of setting up a hospital district and having a government-controlled hospital here in the Concho Valley, let's empower this Shannon Health, which is funded by this gigantic billions of dollars of endowment, and let's allow them to expand, not just Tom Green County. Let's expand into 25 other counties, and let's do the same thing with Hendrick Medical up in Abilene. So that what they're basically doing is they're taking these nonprofit medical care organizations, allowing them to expand, trying to fill the gaps in these 27 counties where you can't deliver a baby. I mean, it's a unique way to look at solving a problem. Now, I guarantee it didn't come from a MAGA Republican, to do that, because it's very much against. But my thought is, when you talk about the private option, and I'm going to bring it back down to the local, because that's what I see. I see the local. I think that if you somehow got Shannon to franchise its medical record system, it's called Epic, and allow independent practitioners, if we can get any coming out of school or whatever, want to set up their own shop, little entrepreneurial doctor or whatever, let them set up and franchise be under the Shannon franchise, and Shannon would provide the management of the medical system, the medical record system. They'll probably have some kind of inspection system or some type of standards you have to maintain, and then those private practices would pay Shannon a little bit, kind of like McDonald's pays 8% of its revenue back to McDonald's in Chicago, right?
Yeah.
I think that might spur some entrepreneurial medical stuff out here that could be copied other places. So that's one of my thoughts. But the one size fits all, I think, is not going to work because we are, Americans are entrepreneurial.
For sure.
And we want to be able to use our entrepreneurial spirit to solve problems.
Yep.
Hence why Uber took out taxis, right? Think about that.
Yep.
In 2011 or 2010, when Uber was just coming out, would you thought that they would take out taxis?
Yeah.
And now taxi drivers are Uber drivers.
It's incredible. Incredible.
So there's got to be some kind of innovation that we could come up with. And I don't know if my ideas are there. I mean, someone in some policy think tank in Austin would probably tell me I'm crazy. Yeah. But if they do, well, come up with your idea, because what's happening right now, you got people who do not have a choice, and they're mad and they're angry and they're blaming Republican politicians for it.
Well, I mean, Republican politicians play a role in this, right? You've had over the last 10 years, you've had almost 20 rural hospitals close in our state.
Well,
right?
But that's Obamacare.
It's not Obamacare.
Sure,
it's
the Medicare reimbursement.
The reimbursement rate is very low.
Yeah,
the reimbursement rate is very low, and a part of the plan that I would introduce is to increase those reimbursement
Okay, and where are you going
rates.
to pay for it?
Well, we spend $37 trillion on healthcare in our country.
Okay.
The money is there. It's about using it the right way.
Okay.
We have enough money in the system to be able to have.
This is where I mean, I guess conceptually you could say, well, if it's a $37 trillion industry, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
All right. Well, then why don't we turn it loose?
Well, turning it loose, is that going to be able to look out for the person in Ballinger, right, that doesn't have someone that's actually fighting for them and making sure that they have what they need? Turning it loose leaves the little guy behind, which the little guy is currently behind right now, which is why I'm running for the United States Senate.
Prior to Obamacare, I had an employee who could not. I could not afford the health care. I mean, you didn't have like right now, if you're 39 years old, your health care is $585 a month, right? There's nothing you can do. Girl, boy, sick, frail, perfectly healthy, bodybuilder. Yeah. You're going to be that same amount of money. But back then, before Obamacare, I had an employee who was 55 years old. She was in poor health, and she had a history behind her, and I couldn't afford health care for her because the health care insurance back then, you can imagine 2003 paying $2,300 a month for health care. Not going to happen. So what I was able to do was they had a pool, an emergency pool, the state of Texas, which I think was probably funded in part by federal dollars, and you can go buy into the pool. So maybe but the problem there is now you're going to throw all of the health care problems of your health insurance, all the problem guys, onto the state, onto this special program for people who can't get insured otherwise. I mean, it's a massive problem. But back then it was affordable for my other guys. Today it's not affordable for anyone, and the reason is we're taking putting everyone in the pool, which I think the Democrats are right. They're saying you can't have insurance if you don't insure everyone, right? The universal insurance is important because otherwise it's not real insurance. You're just going to cherry pick the most healthy people and put them on your thing and charge them $100 a month, right? When you have lots of people, I mean, our health is not determined by necessarily how we act, or I could be in a car wreck and be a paraplegic, and my health care bills are going to go through the roof.
Which is why having that public baseline is helpful, so that small businesses like yours, that look, I actually don't even have to incur that cost. That cost is something that's already taken care of, which makes you more competitive.
But we kind of
from an employment standpoint.
But we kind of have that right now with the way Obamacare has been, I guess, brought down with these high rates.
And when I'm talking to small business owners all across the state, we do not have that. It's why we need something that provides that baseline.
No, we have high rates. So I'm not
going to disagree with you. The rates are high, and it's not affordable for your everyday person, which is why we have to find a way of bringing those costs down.
So how do you bring them? I don't see how you bring them down by unless you just throw a bunch of borrowed government federal money at it.
I just said we spent $37 trillion.
Okay, so
the money is
so it's there somewhere. So
it just has to be used the right way.
But why won't Democrats do anything having to do with entrepreneurial, allowing part of that, just quit controlling like 30 million of it and let people figure stuff out.
But I think when we have this conversation, right, and this is a part of the problem with our politics today, because you're making it a binary decision. Either you pick one or the other. So either you encourage innovation or you say, well, we're going to have a system that provides a baseline. You can do both. You can encourage innovation while also having a baseline.
But that's what Obama tried to do, and it didn't work.
There's progress that was made, but there's a lot more progress that needs to be made.
Right.
I'm not going to disagree with you there. There's a lot more progress we can make, which is why we need to pass a bill that really provides that.
All right.
baseline.
So back in 2009, when they were making the argument for Obamacare, you remember Obama had that meeting with the Republicans where he told John McCain that elections have consequences. Remember that? The kind of shutting down of the argument back then. That those kinds of things that the Democrats have done when they've been in power, and of course Obama was in power for 8 years, and in my opinion, a lot of things that happened in those 8 years have caused the rest of this to go to hell. And the reason is because Obama wouldn't listen to other people. I don't think. I mean, he ridiculed his former opponent, and he was still a senator. I mean, John McCain was still, everyone loved him, and so you have that kind of that's how the discourse started.
Yeah. And I mean, I think when I look at this state right now, because I want to represent Texans and I see what Texans are going through, we need someone in D.C. that's going to be thinking about the everyday person in the state, not someone that's going to be more worried about their corporate donors or the folks that put money in their pockets.
Come on, corporate donors. Every politician is going to love the corporate donors.
Well, listen, I'm telling you right now that we're fighting for the everyday person.
Right.
That's
all right. So let's put a bow and a tie on it. I guess my point on healthcare is you need to have more innovation. How do you do it? Your point is we need more government. Well, we need to continue the government control and just get better with the government control. That's what I'm hearing.
We can have a public baseline that allows for families to not have to be worried about if they're hurting, if they have a problem with their leg, or they're feeling the pain in their stomach.